Hello once again. It's been an interesting day. I listened to a podcast this morning with Dr. Jordan Peterson and another doctor. I don't quite remember her name, but she was a professor of health psychoneuroimmunology at a pretty high level university, and she had been uh, basically reprimanded. She was an associate professor, had tenure, and was told that she was suspended for the upcoming semester without pay because of some opinions that she expressed on a personal blog. And that she was going to have to go through an internal investigation. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was just crazy, you know. She was basically labeled as a racist and that she was trying to promote sexual violence for some opinions that she had happened to express. And so the university didn't even contact her. It just got turned into this public sort of scandal. And then now she doesn't have any idea what she's going to do. She's trying to figure out her next steps. All because of a little noise that was made by some people. And I'll say that, she flat out denies all these allegations of racism and sexual violence. Essentially, what I understood was that she said that there wasn't an issue with systemic racism in Canada. And then now she's just been completely dethroned and is at the risk of, not being able to come back, not having a job. She's not getting paid. And I'm seeing this thing more and more and more and more at universities. And, I think some of this overlaps with my story as well. And as far as my future plans that go, as somebody who's been trying to get a PhD and put a lot of work into that, it really casts a lot of doubt for me on the future of that, and then how well universities are going to be able to continue doing what they're doing, how they're doing things now, how sustainable that's going to be, and especially whether or not universities are going to be able to continue to exist because essentially the costs are insane, and we very likely could move into an environment where we can offer the same or better quality of education online to a much larger audience. And then the only problem that you have to solve at that point essentially is accreditation. So if the education is provided just as it would be provided at the university, it really begs the question, what does the university offer above and beyond the online education, as long as you can show that that person retained that knowledge or gained that knowledge that they need, which would normally be done, through exams and hitting milestones, at the undergraduate level, like a capstone course, and then above and beyond that, like a thesis, etc. And so, for me, I really question a lot of the future for myself, but also for these institutions, these universities, and this rapidly changing world. And that does lead me to a lot of doubt. And the other thing that I just got done watching was a 1 hour movie called The Death and Rebirth of a PhD by a company called Cheeky Scientist. And essentially, they had a lot of people's stories about severe injustices that people faced in graduate school or their postdoc, where they were trying to advance their career, and then a PI which is a principal investigator, basically the head of the lab, took advantage of them, and then they didn't know what future they had. And they were essentially talking about how the structure now is becoming more and more like a pyramid scheme, because the universities are incentivized to churn out more and more and more PhDs, and so you're getting a lot of postdocs who are postdocs for an insane amount of time, like 6 or 7 years, up to 10 years, doing all the work for these PIs for the prospect of a job that they might never get, and being, severely underpaid for it. And same thing with graduate students. You get an insane amount of graduate students and postdocs at the bottom and middle levels, all doing the work of churning out these scientific papers for these PIs. And so there's not as much of a demand for academic jobs. There's a large supply of PhDs, and so many people get left out who are extremely well qualified and talented. And so, it was nice that this company has now formed to help people transition from academic jobs to industry jobs who are facing this problem. But myself, I've sort of encountered it on a more micro level. It's like it's trickled down to where, like, essentially, if you're not familiar with the kind of academic path, especially with clinical psychology now, with how competitive it is, you get your bachelor's, and if you've been extremely productive scientifically throughout your bachelor's, like you're an honor student, you turned out several papers, 4.0 out of 4.0 GPA, all this kind of stuff. When you're an undergraduate, then maybe at that point you can get right into a PhD, although I think that's extremely rare now. So what a lot of people do is they'll do what's called a postdoc, which, if it sounds like a postdoc, it is, because it's essentially doing full-time research like a postdoc does, except you're doing it with a bachelor's instead of with a PhD. And instead of doing a postdoc to get into a faculty position, you're doing a postdoc to get into a PhD program. But I thought 1 to 2 years of a postdoc would be reasonable. But now for me, I'm coming up on, or I guess it's been about 2.5 years since I graduated, and I've done 1.5 years essentially of work directly related to my field that just isn't enough. It's looking more like 2 to 3 years even now. So it just kind of begs the question, like 2 to 3 years of postdoc, and then 6 to 7 years of PhD, and then anywhere from 2 to 6, 7 years as a postdoc to then maybe get into a faculty position, or maybe not even that. Maybe you have to be what's called an adjunct professor, which is like a part-time professor, like as needed kind of professor, the way I understand it. So, the playing field is changing rapidly. Universities are becoming highly problematic at this point, highly susceptible to a small but radical amount of political influence, highly impacting people's careers. We're seeing the loss of the ability to think freely and discuss ideas. And when I'm saying that, I don't mean that we should allow people to be racist or anything like that, but I'm saying an opinion that doesn't align with a very far left-leaning opinion should be allowed to be heard and included in the discourse, so that a conversation around those ideas are maybe a dialogue trying to find, okay, well, where's the truth in between these two disparate opinions, should be allowed to occur, and you shouldn't just completely shun somebody out of their tenured position because they express an opinion that goes against the mainstream opinion, and then that upsets some people, and then the university administrators are so scared about sounding like racists that they don't, or that they just go along with it, and then now you've got somebody whose life is at stake, their career is at stake because of what happened, with them just trying to open the door to a dialogue of ideas that don't align with one perspective. And this isn't just an isolated occurrence, it's happening all over the place. And universities are becoming increasingly subject to this, what I would call indoctrination of ideas, leading to one ideological bias being the only accepted narrative, to the point where people are forced to make a particular decision or be forced to call somebody something, and it's quite ridiculous. I just named off, a couple of instances of craziness happening, but also, Also, there's a story from Yeonmi Park, who is a North Korean defector and went through some of the worst things I've ever heard of in my life, living in communist North Korea, post-Soviet North Korea, and just having completely no freedom, not even knowing what freedom was, or what oppression was, or what love was. And then goes to Columbia University in New York, is subject to these ideas and this ideological indoctrination, and comes out of it after 4 years basically claiming that it was a complete waste of time and money, and that she couldn't recall a single instance of this education having any type of positive effect on her, where it was just completely worthless. And so, that is just so crushing, especially to a person like me, who has been very forward about trying to forge a career in academia and get a PhD, and become one of these people who is able to run a research lab and help people out and contribute to the intellectual discourse. And then now I'm in this position where I have to ask myself, okay, well, what is the future of all of this, and how much more am I going to continue to invest in light of these ideas and these things that are going on out there? And then not only all that, but especially in reference to my own story, which I know I've been on a rant for 15 minutes now, but I'll continue to go into my own story. And I think I might just make this an isolated video, just so as to save time. I know the last one was like an hour long, and I had to take a little bit of pain medication, so I'm feeling a little bit woozy, plus I'm super tired. Yesterday, when I made that video, I mentioned that I had been going for like 12 plus hours, and then I made an hour-long video, and then I stayed up editing that, and then I read, and then I passed out. And today, I actually went to church and had to get dressed, drive across town for that, got back, worked out, and then helped my stepdad clean out a shed. And I'm just completely beat today, but feeling very strongly about some of the issues that are occurring today in society, and just thinking about those in the context of my own life. And so I wanted to shine a light on some of those things as I've been learning about them and then share them. So, yeah, just something to think about. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.